everybody. Welcome to the Red Alert Report for Wednesday, November 9. We have with us a special guest, Barry Shaw, for the Institute of Strategic Studies. He is coming to us from Israel and is going to share his expertise with us on the recent elections so that we understand what's going on and we know how to pray and how to support Israelis, all Israelis, especially the Jewish population there. Barry, thank you for joining us today and for sharing your expertise and giving us your time. I wanted to just ask you to give us a really quick overview of what you do in your background so that our audience understands why you have such an expertise and a eye on the situation.
Well, quite frankly, this is one of the reasons I'm very pleased and to be on your show, because it's important, because for quite some time, I've been trying to put out messages that you don't get over there, and you should be getting over there. Because quite frankly, from some of your politicians, your media, what's going out of your campuses and everything, you're getting a very false message and very false image of Israel. And I have felt it for some time to actually give some of the facts and the information to expose the lies that are being told about Israel all the time, nonstop, and really to give the alternative and truthful message. And it started quite some time ago when I started getting involved when Israel was getting boycotted all over the place by the BDS movement, boycotts, divestments, and sanctions. And I really wanted to expose how hypocritical these people were. And this is going back probably maybe 15 years, maybe a bit more. So I wrote an article, which I surprised, it went viral all over the world. And the name of the article was, "If you're going to boycott Israel, do it properly." That was the sort of aggressive stance that I was taking. And I was exposing that these people who tell everybody they ought to boycott Israel are in fact doing it using a lot of technology which comes through Israel, Israeli medication, Israeli everything. And the people who ask people to boycott Israel are actually using Israeli high-tech or whatever to do this sort of thing. But it got more serious because when I was shouting out how dangerous it was to bring Yasser Arafat back from an exile in Tunisia based on a supposedly start of a two-state solution situation, and he promised us peace of the brave. In fact, he gave us peace of the grave with the greatest terrorist attack against us. And at that time, I became one of the co-founders of the Netanyahu Terror Victims Organization, because his terror struck my hometown, almost killed my wife. And so I know what the reality is. And it's very important for me, through you, Amy, to get the truthful message over and have your people come down from some of the false narratives that are going on and really adopt the truth, because we need your people, to be more guided properly and truthfully, and to represent our voice over there, which I hope to do on your show as we go through the show.
Excellent, excellent. So I know our country's going through midterm elections this week. Some of those races haven't even been fully counted yet, and it's really a battle just between two different ideologies. I don't want to get into that, but we have two major parties, and then we have our three branches of government, and our two houses in the legislature. So maybe you can just give us a very quick tutorial on how the Israeli government is set up, because you also just had major elections, putting a new prime minister into place, but you don't have just two parties. It's a little bit more complex. Can you give us the quick, for dummies version?
Yeah. Well, Israel has a parliamentary system based on nationwide proportionate representation. We don't have state representation because we don't have states. The Knesset, our parliament, is supposed to sit for 4 years, although this is increasingly not the case in Israel. When we went to vote, although we may have a preference to which politician we want to vote for, we actually vote for parties, not individuals. If we prefer one particular politician, we have to vote for his party. In America, as you mentioned, have two main parties. In Israel, in the last election, for instance, we had 35 parties trying to get into the Knesset. In other words, we have democracy on steroids. and the results gave us 10 parties the right to serve in the Israeli parliament, the Israeli Knesset. And this was decided by each party having to reach at least 3.25% of the total vote in order to what we call cross the electoral threshold. Below that, a party gets 0 seats. If it gets more than 3.25%, it gets 4 seats.
Oh,
so
wow.
that's the way the system works. There's no such thing as a party with 1, 2, or 3 seats. It's either 4 or nothing.
Okay, very interesting. And then from those elections for these parties into the Knesset, is that from which your prime minister then emerges?
Yeah, okay. So the Knesset is made up of 120 seats or mandates. And for a party to form a government, they need at least 61 seats in the Knesset to have a majority. Well, if no party gains 61 seats, the Israeli president usually invites the leader of the party which achieved the most votes in the election. In this case, it's Benjamin Netanyahu, whose Likud party won 32 seats, to try and form a majority government. And to do that, the leader of the party, in this case, Benjamin Netanyahu, has to bring in other parties that will collectively give him a coalition of 61 seats. So that's that part. Now, what happens if he doesn't achieve? Actually, he's given about 3 weeks to be able to achieve that. If he doesn't get 61 seats, then the president is entitled to call on the leader of the party with the second most amount of seats. In this case, it would be Yair Lapid, and give him an opportunity of creating at least a 61-seat majority. Now, the way that the results ended up, it's easy for Benjamin Netanyahu to form a coalition of at least 64 seats if his Likud party goes together with what we have over here, 3 religious parties. That would give him a total of 64 seats. Now, he could go another way, in which he could call for a unity government by saying, you know what, I will go with Yair Lapid, and then maybe we'll bring in, with each approval, 2 other parties, and we could get to a government of, say, 70 seats. That choice would initially be one with Benjamin Netanyahu, and all the reports over here is talking about him taking the first route, in that creating a coalition with his own Likud party, which is center-right, together with 3 religious parties.
And what are the major issues at hand in Israel? Obviously, security is probably always one of them, but what, a little bit more nuanced, what are the issues that are facing the Israeli people, upon which they then chose the party, because they can't choose the candidate, and where they lean on those issues that would make the potential prime minister or the prime minister try to get those attitudes together?
Well, Amy, that's the good question. And in fact, it's the crucial question. The 2 main issues for Israelis who went into the polling stations were security and security. Now, economic security, as families over here, and you've got this in the States, I understand, are increasingly finding it more difficult to pay their bills with rising prices on everything. Even for young couples are finding it almost impossible to find the money to buy a home or even pay the mortgage. And I guess you know that phenomenon over there in America. Now, the other issue is physical security. And this is where I'm going to come in with some information over here.
Great.
I know that in America, you have issues with uncontrollable rising crime and a system that allows dangerous criminals to go out of jail and commit more crimes. I understand that's an issue over there that's important in your election over there. And here in Israel, our problem is incessant rockets and terror. Now, I'm going to ask you, or by you, to your viewers as well. I want you to guess how many terror attacks Israelis have suffered in the last year. And this is, I'm going to come on to some crucial questions and crucial information. So I want your viewers to pay notice. I want each of your viewers to guess how many terror attacks have Israelis suffered just in the last year. Amy, give it your best shot.
150.
Try going up a bit.
900.
Well, let me tell you that in the last year, and these figures are according to the Israeli Foreign Ministry, there have been, wait for it, over 2,200 terror attacks against Israelis.
And that's in a country the size of perhaps New Jersey.
9 million.
Give it a context.
9 million.
9 million people, a country physically the size of New Jersey. And Americans need to understand we have our catastrophes and our gun violence and these mass shootings. And if we have one mass shooting a year or two, which is too many and horrible, we go berserk. So now think about 2,000 in a year. That's multiple per
2002. Well, I gave an interview on an Israeli program about 3 or 4 days ago. At that time, it had gone up to 2,205. Since there would be more. I think we're over 2,220, more like 2,230. Hundreds of. I want to add, and again, this is I'm putting the question through you, Amy, to your viewers, Jewish or Christian. Did you know this statistic? Has it ever been given to you in America?
I don't see it on any news headline on a paper or an online news outlet or coming from commentators. And, Barry, you might want to inform our viewers what that really means. I mean, we're used to seeing things like somebody was pushed off a subway platform or there was a drive-by shooting, but terrorist attacks in Israel can be someone stabbing you on the street, or it could be a bomb, or it could be a rocket.
Let me tell you what this is in detail, in accurate detail. Now, before I get to this, I'm going to go off subject and come back in subject because it might be something you may want to cover later, but I'll cover it now because I'm going to explain something to you and your viewers, right? We're already hearing that Benjamin Netanyahu, Bibi, is forming a government with these 3 religious parties. One of them is made up of what people are calling racists, right? Guy called Ben-Gvir, perhaps, Smodrich, right? Racist. Why? Because one of them was calling out for a death sentence for terrorists. So let me give you just a little bit of background, global background, more information your viewers in America don't know about, but I'll come back to it because I'm going around in a circle here, but it all relates together if you allow me to do it very quickly. Sure. I just want to tell you that in Europe, in democratic countries in the last month, there have been 3 or now 4 with America, 4 elections. There was one in Sweden, all right, where the Swedish people decided to ditch their left-wing party that had been there for decades and swing to the right. And the reason for that was caused by something you may recall in America, unbridled migration of legal migrants being allowed into the country by a left-wing government, causing not only economic damage, but also the sort of crimes that Sweden never had before, and even terrorism, right? And they decided to ditch it. And what did the excuse of the outgoing Social Democrat Party and the left say? Well, these right-wing people are really Nazis and neo-Nazis, and you should be careful of them. And then the next election that came up was one in Italy, in which a woman became the first female ever to become the prime minister of Italy. And she wanted a free market economy. She wanted Italy to become Italian and not dependent on the bureaucrats of the European Union in Brussels. And they started calling her also a fascist because her party had roots in Mussolini. And when I spoke to, as part of my job, political analysts in Sweden and other places, I said, tell me, today, would you call the German chancellor a Nazi? Because Germany had a greater background in Nazism and the Third Reich than Sweden did. And he said, no. I said, well, would you call this woman in the Chancellor of Italy or even Austria as it'd be fascist or Nazi today? No. So why are you using this excuse? So now what they're coming out with, oh, by the way, let me add, we've been watching over here what the Democrat Party, even the president, has been saying about anybody who didn't vote Democrat in your election. We remember seeing President Biden speak at a public speaking, I think it was in Philadelphia, which what looked to us to be as fascist a background as you can have, with dark and red lightings and two military figures there, calling other people who didn't vote for the Democrats as semi-fascist. So you've had over there, and anybody who doesn't want to vote Democrats being called fascist, and in some places also Nazis. So, you know, we can bear it, let's put it this way. But coming back to the Israeli situation, I mentioned 2,200 terror attacks, which has meant hundreds of Israelis being murdered and even more severely injured. And when we identified the people who have carried out these terror attacks, they're either been Palestinian Arab or Israeli Arab, virtually 100% of the hundreds murdered, 100% almost of the 2,200 and something and counting terror attacks. And that is not racist to identify the people who are coming to kill us.
That's right.
It sounds harsh language over there, but we live in a very harsh environment over here. And this is the reason personal security, that people went to the vote and said, we need more personal security, and we're going to vote for the people who are going to give us that personal security. That led to the result of the elections so far. So far, we don't have a government. We still have to go through the process. But that is the background about it. And quite frankly, what this has done is the left in Israel has gone almost completely to extinction. The far left party in Israel, the Meretz party, which was once the Communist Party of Israel, completely got wiped off the map. And the other party, the left-wing party, this is an important note, the Labour Party. The Labour Party was, if you recall, people who know Israeli history, was the founding party of the state of Israel under David Ben-Gurion. It was the party of Yitzhak Rabin. It was the party of Shimon Peres. And under a woman called Michal Michaeli, it just about scraped over the minimum threshold, and they will have only 4 seats in the new Knesset, the new parliament, and they are looking to get there at all. So what has happened in the last election, few days ago, is that the left has completely gone off the map completely.
So was some of the policies on the left that people were discouraged with or frustrated with an inability to crack down on terror? Like in the United States, we have the issue of crime and the issue of leniency on and cashless bail and these things that are lenient on the criminals and letting them out, a revolving door prison system, and that's weighing in on our elections. Is that some of what was going on there? Because you have all these terrorist attacks, that means the terrorists are on the street.
We have crime is important to us, but it's less of a problem over here than it is in America. Terrorism is the main one. But yes, we also have crime. And, you know, funnily enough, where the major crime situations are in the Arab towns here in Israel of Israeli Arabs, in which up till recently, they didn't want to have the Israeli government increase the police, because they said, we don't want to be seeing that the Israelis are policing our Arab towns. So we said in the past, do it yourself, but they didn't do it themselves. And what you have in a lot of Arab towns are completely changed, where the mayors are now demanding of the Israeli government in order to come and help restore law and order in both the Arab towns and also in the Negev, where the Negev Bedouin are going around with guns and they're not only going after Israelis, they're going after each other, because there are family rivalries and clan rivalries which result in honor killings and murders and whatever. So the interior personal security is highly important over here. And this is one of the things that this Ben-Gvir is pushing for. He's pushing to become what's called the Interior Security Ministry, in order to get a handle on the rising crime coming out of the Arab towns in the main, but also on the terrorism as well. And that's one of the things that Israel previous government failed. But they also failed on a couple of other things. One of that was, of course, the economic situation. But the other thing as well, that going into the elections, the Israelis saw that this government, both with Yair Lapid, who was the prime minister, and Benny Gantz, who was the defense minister, giving basically gifts to both the Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, and also to Hezbollah, if you like, in Lebanon as well. By that I mean that Yair Lapid surrendered Israeli territory, maritime territory, to Lebanon. And he made what was perceived over here as lies to the Israeli public by saying that we're talking about parts of the Mediterranean Sea that may possibly have a treasure trove of natural gas in the sea. We have an Israeli rig that's just opening up right now, which is going to be sending via Egypt a huge amount of natural gas to Europe for the Europeans. But then the Lebanese had some land over there, and there was an agreement that land was at 55%, and there was agreement about 55% belonging to Lebanon, 45% belonged to Israel. But Yair Lapid reneged on it totally, 100%. And he said, if there's going to be any revenue, that revenue will not go to Hezbollah. But he lied, because Lebanon is controlled by Hezbollah by virtue of the Speaker of the Lebanese Parliament being of the Amal movement. This is where I get the technicality. This is where I'm from, the strategic affairs issue, which is a Shiite organization. And Hezbollah is the Shiite representative, the armed wing of the Shiites in Lebanon, who were also a proxy of Iran as well. Wow. And then we saw Benny Gantz, who, for instance, there was an Oslo Accord signed many years ago, if you remember, under Bill Clinton on the White House law, where Shimon Peres and Rabin shook the hands of Yasser Arafat, because he said, as I said before, was supposed to give us peace of the brave, and he came back and gave us peace of the grave. But at that also, there was an agreement that the areas in what's called Judea and Samaria would be divided up into areas A, B, and C. A being under the full control of the Palestinian Authority, both civil administration and security. B, which would be under the Palestinian Authority, both administrative, but the security would be joint Palestinian Authority security forces with the IDF. But Area C would remain totally under Israeli control until any time in the future there will be a permanent peace agreement with the Palestinians. And there we are now, 20-something years later? Yeah. Not an end in sight. But what's been going on behind the scenes is Benny Gantz has been meeting Mahmoud Abbas, and recently, a couple of months ago, he made an agreement with them, not signed, didn't go to the Israeli Knesset, where he agreed to give them parts of Area C. This is where it's important, strategically, security-wise, right, to give them thousands of dunam of land for them to build 4,000 homes for 4,000 Palestinian families. And this land, if people have been to Israel and knows it, lies between Jerusalem on the road leading down to the Dead Sea, before you get to Male Adumim, the growing Israeli town of Male Adumim. Basically, it cuts off Male Adumim from the main ground of Israel itself. And what did we get for that? We got Yair Lapid going to the United Nations talking about his keenness for a two-state solution that's been dead for 50 years. But at the same time, he was followed on the podium by Mahmoud Abbas, who said that Israel virtually has no legitimacy, that we have carried out 50 massacres. 3 weeks earlier, he had gone to Germany and accused us of carrying out, listen for this, 50 Holocausts. This is the exaggeration. This is our peacemaker. And this really has incensed a lot of the Israelis, that even somebody who was in charge of the IDF and is up till now has been the defense minister, is selling Israel down the river, getting nothing in return from the Palestinians, no gesture of peace or anything whatsoever, no recognition whatsoever. And this also drove Israelis to vote more right-wing than they are. Even previously, Israel has been 60% center-right, but now we're moving even further to right because we see that a center-left and a left-wing government can't bring us economy, can't bring us peace, and we have to watch out for our own preservation.